Think about it, okay, Sam? You can't tell me that such a thought has never crossed your mind. It was Julie, my wife of 6 years, trying to convince me that we should consider switching with another couple. I wasn't thrilled with the idea. Of course, there were times when I thought it would be funny to get my hands on a strange woman. Between the year of courtship and the 6 years of marriage, there were 7 years of exclusivity with one woman. And during those 7 years, there were many women who made it very clear that their bodies were available for my pleasure. I admit that I was tempted, but only tempted. Too many of my friends' marriages have failed because one or both of the spouses who had pledged fidelity couldn't resist when something strange came their way. I have to admit that I'm not exactly a saint. My virtuous behavior was partly due to the simple fact that Julie is an absolute stunner, a pretty face, eyes you could get lost in, a body that belonged in some sexy magazine, and a libido that still makes me dizzy. Why tempt fate? Also, one aspect of the exchange may have some appeal, the part where I have sex with the other man's wife. The other half just left me cold, the part where the other man has sex with my wife. Definitely not one of my fantasies. But then my wife tried to convince me that switching places could be fun. Clearly, all the work I had put into making Julie happy and satisfied with our sex life was in vain. So, I did my best to explain to Julie the reasons why it wouldn't work. My arguments weren't the best. It came out of nowhere. I've just finished my second ale, and I admit that I may not be very good at making counter-arguments when I'm emotional or after 2 high-octane ales. Julie, I have no desire to watch you have sex with someone else. Okay, then we'll do it in different rooms. I don't want some guy to have you in our bed. You take the master bedroom, and the other guy and I can use the guest room. What about diseases? We will make everyone take tests and find out the results before the exchange. Julie, you seem to have an awful lot of answers. How long have you been thinking about this? It's only been a couple of weeks, Sam, but I've been reading about it. I wouldn't want to do anything that would jeopardize our marriage. You don't think that sex with another guy won't jeopardize our marriage? Not if we both agree to it in advance and both get something from it. It's sharing, not changing. Julie noticed my hesitation. Damn, I can't believe she brought this up after I'd finished my second ale. It wasn't fair, or maybe that was why she was bringing it up now. I'll tell you what, Sam. We won't rush. I'll put an ad in the Real Detroit Weekly. We will meet several potential couples. If something doesn't seem right, we'll stop it. No harm, no violation. Now let's go to bed. Like a lamb to the slaughter, I allowed my wife to take my hand and lead me upstairs to our bedroom. The combination of the beer, the emotion, the sight of my wife taking off her clothes. Yes, even after all these years, the sight could turn me on extremely, and the rush of blood to my little head ensured that I was crazy about Julie and her grand plans. I did everything I could to turn Julie's world upside down that night. Anything to make Julie realize that she doesn't need another man. Call me stupid, call me naive, whatever. But imagine my surprise when Julie sat down to dinner the following week and told me the news. We have already received 14 worthy responses to our ad. Yes, like I said, stupid. What announcement? Our ad in Real Detroit, silly. Julia stood up from the table and took the latest issue of Real Detroit from her briefcase. She handed it to me, opening it in the Personal Affairs section. There was an advertisement circled under the heading Couples Seeking Couples. Attractive, clean, white couple, mid-20s, looking for the same partner exchange. I've read this damn article at least 3 times. Julie, I don't remember saying yes to that. What the hell? Sam, I just thought it got you so worked up last weekend that you agreed. I could tell you were thinking about it the whole time we made love. You had a glassy, absent look. I knew you were imagining yourself with someone new. This is wrong. Damn it. Julie actually had the nerve to start laughing at this. I started to sulk. Julie stopped laughing, sat on my lap, and kissed me. Looking me in the eyes, Julie returned to her counter-argument. Well, in that case, thank you. I understand you were trying to impress me with your masculinity and toughness. Damn it, it was. Listen, Sam, I started talking about the exchange not because I was unhappy. I thought it would add an element of fun and excitement. I thought we could have a little fun with this before we have kids and become a typical suburban family with a minivan and strollers. Julie hesitated for a moment before continuing. I'll tell you what. Let's just try it and see what happens. This will give us a chance to overcome conventions, at least for a while. Didn't I already say this? Stupid, naive me. I didn't say no, and the train kept moving. It didn't take long for Julie to make an appointment with the couple she chose from all the answers. The following weekend, Julie and I were getting the house ready for an evening of fun with our new friends. On the table in front of the fireplace were 2 trays of appetizers, as well as open bottles of Merlot and Pinot Bianco. There were 2 sofas on both sides of the table. Everything was ready for the happy couple to meet. Everyone but me. I kept wondering how angry Julie would be if or when I kicked the potential changelings back out the door. But I didn't. The doorbell rang, and Julia and I opened the door together. Kyle and Susan were standing there. Kyle had a big smile on his face, and Susan looked just like me. It was as if the guillotine had suddenly appeared, and we were condemned. Kyle had a dozen roses in one hand and a bottle of Burgundy in the other. Julie motioned for them to come in. Before the door could close, Kyle passed the bottle to me and put his free arm around Julie. Susan stood rooted to the spot, clearly not knowing how to greet me. They were an attractive couple. Kyle was at least 10 centimeters taller than my 180 centimeters, obviously a gym goer or some kind of athlete. He had that handsome, stern look that women seem to be in awe of. Susan was a sweetheart, although she would have been even prettier if she had smiled. She really has surpassed Julie in terms of figure. Her bust might have been a little smaller, but the whole outfit was something that would make most men's mouths water. We were introduced to each other and the wine was poured. We sat and chatted. Each couple was on their own settee, but Julia sat opposite Kyle and Susan sat opposite me. I was about to top up everyone's glasses when Julie stood up and announced, "Well, we all know why we're here." They left with Kyle. She looked at me with a smile on her face. "See you in the morning." Stunned, unconscious, I just sat and watched as the 2 of them went into the guest bedroom. Finally, I came to my senses and looked at Susan. What just happened? I'm surprised they lasted so long. I've never seen Kyle so excited. Have you 2 done this before? No. Kyle came home last week with a copy of Real Detroit and told me he answered your ad. Said we were going to open our marriage. I had no choice in the matter. You don't seem to like it too much. Why did you post the ad if you have such doubts? I didn't do it. Julie did it. Like you, I was overwhelmed by it all. Look, don't get me wrong because you are a very attractive woman, but if you don't mind, I'd rather spend some time getting to know each other better. Do you mind if we wait a little bit before we go to the bedroom? Susan looked at me as if she had just received a reprieve from execution. Yes, I would like that. That's exactly what we did. We sat down on one of the sofas and talked. I liked her, but from our conversation I realized that she was one of those women who needed a huge dose of self-confidence. She knew she was beautiful, but felt she was compared poorly to women like Julie and was reluctant to share her views on most of the topics we discussed. An hour must have passed. Susan and I were still sitting there talking quietly with the lights off when Kyle walked out of the bedroom and into the kitchen. He was naked, and his body glowed when he opened the refrigerator door. The guy was built like a Greek god. Kyle grabbed 2 beers from the refrigerator and padded back into the bedroom, not noticing Susan and me. I understand that Kyle is well hung. Yes, it's big. It could hurt if he's not careful. I think this may be the reason for trading him. Damn, that's the last thing I wanted to hear. I lifted Susan off the couch. Okay, why don't I show you the bedroom? You can sleep in our bed, and I'll take the chair. I gave Susan one of my t-shirts to sleep in, and she insisted that I share the bed with her. I placed one of the king-size pillows between us. I have heard that Mennonite couples do this when they get engaged so that they can sleep together without violating their virtue. I don't know if it's true, but I felt like I did the right thing that night. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I let Julie drag me into this story. It was 9 in the morning when I woke up. Susan's side of the bed was empty. I put on my sweatpants and walked down the stairs to the kitchen. Susan was sitting at the table alone, and the coffee pot was half full. Sorry I slept for so long. I see you found coffee. Thank you. I need a cup. I didn't make the coffee. You just missed Julie and Kyle. They had just returned to the bedroom to take a shower. Together? Shit. Do you think we can keep these two apart? I told Kyle I was leaving in an hour, with or without him. He didn't take it well, but I needed to be at my parents' house for brunch. It's their 30th anniversary. I grabbed the Sunday paper from the porch and went about my usual Sunday morning routine, coffee and the sports page, followed by the book review section. Susan sat across from me, reading or trying to pretend she was reading. At 11 tar, she rose from her chair and knocked on the bedroom door. "Kyle, it's time. I'm leaving." Susan returned to the table, kissing the top of my head. "Thank you for being such a gentleman. I'm sorry it turned out this way." "Me too. Wait, that didn't sound right? I don't regret that we didn't have sex. Well, maybe I'm a little sorry because you're so gorgeous, but I'm sorry. Oh, damn, whatever." Just then, Kyle walked into the room with a huge smile on his face that I wanted to wipe off. He patted me on the back and said something as he walked towards the front door. "Did you and Susan have a good night? See you, Sam." And then he walked out the door. I went back to the guest bedroom and looked inside. Julie was asleep and I left before I threw up. Julie didn't get up until 5 that day. I spent the afternoon on the treadmill. I didn't count the laps, but I wouldn't be surprised if I ran at least a half marathon. On the way home, I bought some Thai food. Enough for 2, in case Julie got up and got hungry. She was hungry. We sat down and ate. Julie was all so playful. "Did you and Susan have a good time last night?" "Actually, we didn't do anything last night. None of us were in the mood." Julia sat with her chopsticks at the ready, her mouth open. "You spent the whole night with this beautiful woman, and you're telling me you didn't do anything?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. She said Kyle put it on her, and she wasn't ready to change." I wondered if Julie would catch the implication of my statement. She didn't. "Well, this is very bad. I'm sure you two would have fun." "What about you, Julie? Did you have fun with Kyle?" "It was nice. Everything was fine." I wondered why Julie was downplaying this. "So, does this mean we're crossing Kyle and Susan off the list?" Julie looked surprised by my statement. No. Let's wait and see. Can we not talk about this anymore tonight? I hate to think that we have nothing more to discuss together. How was your run today?" "Okay, maybe I'm slow-witted, but not that much." On Monday morning, I called our firm's lawyer and asked to meet with him and the family lawyer from his firm. Unfortunately, I had to fly to Seattle early Tuesday morning, and our conflicting schedules meant we wouldn't be able to meet until the following Monday. I also asked for a recommendation from a private investigator. That afternoon, I was at the Rice Investigations Office meeting with Ronald Rice. I briefed Mr. Rice on everything I needed to know. He said they could start investigating by Wednesday and would probably have something for me within a week. Here I have to take a step back and explain how a 25-year-old guy ended up with a beautiful 1,000-square-meter house with a swimming pool and his own business. My grandfather, my mother's father, left both the house and the business to me, his only grandson, when he died 2 years ago. I started working in my grandfather's machine shop when I was 16, after school, on weekends, during vacations. This may sound bad, but my grandfather always gave me free time to play sports and go on dates. I attended a local university, majoring in business and accounting. Grandpa always said that there are a lot of guys who have technical knowledge, but few of them can run a business. Money management is as important as technical know-how if you want to run a successful business. Grandfather's will was common knowledge. I would inherit the house and most of the business. I met Julia when I was at a reception with one of the large manufacturers to whom we supply machine parts. She was one of the clerks in the purchasing department. I took a chance when I noticed the missing ring on her left hand. Invited her on a date. She said yes, and within a month, we were a couple. 6 months later, we were engaged. Then my father intervened. He asked my grandfather's law firm to draw up a prenuptial agreement, protecting my future inheritance if we divorced within the first 25 years of marriage. Dad said he would take the fall if my fiancé was upset about the prenuptial agreement. Julie didn't seem too upset about the conditions. She was madly in love with me. I remember her words exactly. 25 years? And that's all? I planned to be married to Samuel for at least 50 years. God, I loved this woman. Grandfather died 4 months after his 83rd birthday. I think he might have lived to be 100, but he was 32 years old when he was captured by the Japanese during World War II and spent 18 months in a prison camp in China. If you know anything about the conditions in the camps, you know how harsh they were for the prisoners. More than 30% of American prisoners of war in Japanese camps died in captivity, compared to 1% in German camps in the European theater. Be that as it may, these months in captivity damaged some of his internal organs, but he always claimed that he was one of the lucky ones. He returned home after the war and lived as long as he did. Here I am, 29 years old, with a wife, a house, and a great business. But even after 2 years, I missed my grandfather every morning when I walked into the workshop. Dinner with Julie on Monday night went smoothly. We actually made love that night, as I would be gone until Friday. If you're wondering why I left town when my marriage was hanging by a thread, the answer is simple. My company needed this contract from a Seattle aerospace company that supplies Boeing. Without this contract, I might have had to lay off a couple of employees. I hoped my marriage would survive, but I needed that contract. I kissed Julie goodbye on Tuesday morning and told her I loved her. She thanked me for the night and said how nice it was. She hugged me and told me she loved me more than ever. I felt almost human again when I jumped into the taxi. As usual, Julie and I talked on the phone every evening while I was on the road. During a conversation on Thursday evening, I received a nudge. It was a good day, and I was in a great mood. Terms were agreed earlier in the day, and the contract will be signed tomorrow morning. Not only will everyone at the plant have a job for the next 2 years, but I may have to hire an extra machinist. Life was good, and then everything went wrong. Julie's voice shook with emotion as we chatted. I thought it was because of my news, but apparently something else was more exciting. Guess what, Sam? I spoke with Kyle today, and he explained why Susan was so reluctant to change last Saturday. They discussed everything, and Susan agreed to this Saturday. Isn't this wonderful? Wait, Julie, do you mean they will come again on Saturday? I'm not too thrilled about this. I've been out of town for 3 days, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with you. We'll have it all done on Friday when you get home, Sam. Don't worry, you'll be a happy camper when I'm done with you. In my defense, it was a long 2 days of negotiations with 3 vice presidents, and I didn't have the energy to argue with Julie over the phone. I hadn't eaten much all day, and it was 7 p.m. on the West Coast. I told Julie I would see her tomorrow. I need to eat. She told me again how much she loved me before we hung up. I was told that the steaks at the Metropolitan Grill in Seattle were as good as anywhere in the U.S., but I don't remember much about the filet I ordered that night. There was bourbon, I remember that. Friday. I needed to concentrate and pay attention. Last-minute additions were made to the contract. Nothing unusual for such a large order. This meant I had to switch from a 1-hour flight to a 5-hour one. There was 1 seat left on the 5-hour flight, and it was in first class, but I booked it. We spent the morning sorting out the final details, had lunch in the conference room, and by 2:30, I was on my way to the airport. When it rains, it pours like buckets. Literally. Seattle may be used to a lot of rain, but thunderstorms are a different matter. My flight was delayed, and then delayed again. We finally taxied to the runway at 9 p.m. After a 5-hour flight and a 2-hour time difference, the plane landed at Wayne Metropolitan Airport at 5 in the morning. The taxi arrived at my door at 6, and I immediately went to bed. Julie woke up just long enough to kiss me, and then we both fell asleep. When I called Julie last night, she was watching crappy TV and always had trouble sleeping when I was out of town, so I guess she was up most of the night. When I woke up, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Julie wasn't home, but there was a note. Sam, I'm at the spa. I'm going to get a massage at 1 p.m. Hair coloring and cutting and everything else. Should be home before 5. Hope you got some rest. Love you, Julie. I knew better than to try to call. Julie turns off her phone while at the spa. And no, I never worried that Julie was using this time to get away from me, not even this afternoon. If you saw what she looked like every time she came home from the spa, you'd realize that 3 hours and $300 was a bargain. Julie burst into the house at 5 minutes to 5. "You look great, baby. How about we go out to dinner tonight?" Julie hugged me tightly and kissed me even harder. "What are you talking about, Sam? The Taylors will be here in half an hour." "Wait, do you mean they'll still come? I assumed that you would cancel the meeting, since we spent no more than half an hour together and had not slept since Tuesday morning." "It would be rude to cancel a meeting at the last minute." "Sorry, I thought we talked about this on Thursday. How Susan can't wait to make it up to you." I got angry. "Is that why you spent the day at the spa? To get ready for Kyle?" "Of course not, stupid. Tomorrow afternoon we have the Kaufman wedding. You know what all these women are like. They'll tear me to pieces if I don't show up at my best. Now hurry up and shave. The Taylors will be here soon." By the time I finished shaving, the doorbell rang. By the time I got to the front door, Kyle and Susan were already in the house. "I have a few cans of beer chilling in the guest room. We all know why we are here tonight. No need to waste time." She took Kyle's hand and headed into the bedroom. I looked at Susan. She lowered her eyes. "Sam, let's go to bed." Susan headed up the stairs to the master bedroom. I went to the kitchen and took a bottle of wine, 2 glasses and 2 pears. By the time I entered the master bedroom, Susan was under the covers. I poured the wine and cut a few slices of pear with my pocket knife. "What made you change your mind, Susan? Where does this sudden desire come from?" "I won't lie to you, Sam. I haven't changed my mind. Kyle told me that was part of the deal. If we didn't do this with you, you would stop letting us come. Don't get me wrong, Sam. I think you are a very attractive man and a true gentleman, but I'm not in love with you. That's not who I am. Please, let's go to bed and let's just do this." "No, I think we are both who we are. We're not going to do it just because our spouses want it. Let's drink wine and watch TV." And that's exactly what we did until Susan fell asleep around midnight. An hour later, I got up and went down to the kitchen to drink something stronger. I was pouring myself a glass of bourbon when I looked out the back window. In the moonlight, I could see 2 people in the pool. They were having sex. I didn't mean to watch them, but it was like my friend once told me. He was skiing when he stopped, looked up and saw a man skiing down the slope, apparently out of control. My friend said he didn't want to watch. The man was heading straight towards the grove of trees. The man crashed into more than one tree, and my friend still couldn't turn his head or close his eyes. My friend started crying while telling this story. This was 10 years after the event. That day, I saw a man die, and I could not look away. I couldn't either. I threw up in the sink. Luckily, I didn't eat anything solid all day except half a pear. I washed the vomit down the drain and headed back to the bedroom, pouring myself a second glass of bourbon. It dawned on me as I looked at Susan sleeping on the other side of the bed. I threw back the blanket and lifted the sleeve of the t-shirt she was wearing. I saw this before, but didn't pay attention. There was a large black and blue bruise on Susan's upper left arm. I didn't wake her up, but I did put a note on the bedroom door so she would see it before leaving the room. "Susan, important, wake me up." It was early Sunday when Susan woke me up. "Sam, what is it? Why do you want me to wake you up so early?" I looked into Susan's eyes. "Where did you get this bruise on your arm?" Susan looked scared. "I ran into the door. I'm so clumsy. Why did you ask?" "I don't need this crashed into the door nonsense." "How? Tell me the truth." I lowered my voice. She still looked scared, but this time she answered me. "Kyle did it. He got upset when I told him that you and I didn't have sex last weekend. He said if I didn't do it this time, he would hit me again." "Did he beat you?" "When?" "Last year when we quarreled. He doesn't hit me often, but sometimes when he gets really angry, he gets a little carried away." "Susan, it doesn't mean a little skidding. Have you thought about going to the police?" I never knew, or at least never knew for sure, what a battered spouse was. But I had watched enough life movies with Julie to understand everything Susan said over the next 10 minutes. All excuses for her husband's abuse. All the reasons she couldn't leave him. All the reasons why she refused to admit the truth when police questioned her last year. Susan spoke, and I listened. not trying to argue with her. "Susan, don't worry. I'm going to tell Julie and Kyle that we had sex last night. You should say the same. Tell Kyle we've done this twice. Remember, twice. Tell him I was a gentleman, and it was a pleasure. Not cool or anything. Just cute. We need our stories to be true, but we can't let Kyle get jealous. If Julie and Kyle want to get back together next weekend, go for it. Don't act like you're impatient. Just tell him it's okay. You understand?" I didn't tell Susan what I actually had planned for the coming week. I didn't trust her enough to not spill the beans if Kyle was mean to her. He might not have hit her again if he didn't think she was hiding something. When Julie and Kyle came into the kitchen later that morning, I played a game. "Kyle, you were right. Susan and I had a fantastic night." The looks on Julie and Kyle's faces almost made me feel sick again. Kyle and Susan left soon after. Julie and I went to the Kaufman's wedding and reception, acting like the loving couple everyone expected to see. Julie hinted while we were dancing that I could expect some action when we got home, but by the time we walked through the door, I told her I was too tired. I think she was relieved. She was probably still sore from last night. Monday will be a long day. I held a short meeting at work, assigning tasks to each of the managers of my company to prepare for a new job. At 10:30, I was out the door. Meeting Ronald Rice opened my eyes. Here's what I found out. Kyle Taylor was a sales representative for a company that did business with Julie's company. They must have known each other well before Julie brought up the topic of trading with another couple. The newspaper advertisement was a ruse to hide the obvious intended outcome. Kyle Taylor has a history of run-ins with the law. One of the reasons he would never advance beyond sales representative was his criminal record. 1 conviction for battery and a felony for assault. Kyle was lucky with his job, although both sentences were passed more than 6 years ago. He was investigated, but his wife Susan did not press charges, and he was released. By now, I wasn't too stunned to learn that Julie and Kyle had a long lunch last Thursday at the hotel. The more I heard, the more surprised I became that Julie, who I thought was a pretty smart woman, got involved with such a snake. Did she have any idea who she was having sex with? My meeting with the lawyers that day set everything in motion. Both lawyers listened to the chain of events leading up to today. They were glad I didn't have sex with Susan, but I noticed something in the way they looked at each other that made me uneasy. "What?" "It would be very helpful if you could somehow get Julie to confirm that the exchange was her idea, that you never said yes to this. It would also be helpful if we could get a statement from Susan confirming that the sex never happened." The lawyers and I discussed the prenuptial agreement and the expected terms of the divorce. According to the prenuptial agreement, my home and business were safe. I will probably end up sharing half of the other assets accumulated after the wedding. This, of course, hurt me, but I was determined to end this marriage as quickly as possible. A new contract for the plant would take a lot of time over the next few months, and I couldn't afford for that contract to fall through. It was easy to get Julia to open up on Monday night. She admitted that the idea of the exchange was her initiative. Since she now assumed that I had slept with Susan, Julie went on and on during a pleasant dinner about how she knew I would like it. She even admitted that she did it over my objections, chatting blissfully while I secretly recorded the conversation. What she didn't admit was that she knew Kyle before the ad was submitted. I enjoyed the fact that I would soon get rid of the cheater. I decided that I needed to do one more thing: get Susan out from under Kyle's thumb. For this, I would need Ronald Rice again. Separating Susan from Kyle turned out to be easier than expected. With Rice's help, we played on 2 of Kyle's biggest flaws: his overwhelming ego and violent tendencies. I called Kyle and asked him to meet me at a bar under the pretext that I needed to understand his secret recipe for making my wife enjoy sex. I acted like a stupid cuckold on the phone, told him that Julie just hasn't enjoyed sex with me since we started swapping. What was his secret? Kyle couldn't help but swallow my words of sorrow at his excellent lovemaking. The fool agreed to sit with me and share his knowledge about women. On Wednesday, we met and sat at a table in a bar. I listened to him, All this time, I continued to buy drinks. Kyle must have had 4 beers and 4 whiskeys in the hour and a half we were there. I thanked Kyle and told him it was time for me to leave, but asked the bartender to get Kyle one last beer before I left. Just to thank you for your help. I wasn't there when the second part of the Kyle ambush happened, but Rice told me the next day that things couldn't have gone better. One of Ron Rice's partners, one John Henson, leaned over the back wall of the booth and quietly said that Kyle was complete crap. Obviously, the whole thing was a provocation, but Kyle was too drunk to realize it, and as Henson walked past Kyle with his back turned, Kyle hit him. Henson screamed, and the bartender and 2 patrons called 911 while Kyle was subdued by 2 other patrons. $3,000 was well spent, including the $1,500 that Henson received for his role in the play. The cops showed up. Kyle was arrested and charged with assault and battery. As a result, he had to serve 2 years. His public defender asked for probation, but given Kyle's past criminal record, the judge sent him to jail. I'd hate to frame him, but any man who beats his wife deserves to go to jail. 2 years seemed like a lenient sentence, considering what he had done to Susan, but at least he was gone and Susan was safe, for now. One of my lawyer's partners was referred and helped Susan connect with a women's group to help abused spouses. I also asked a friend of mine who had a small business to offer Susan a job. It was only an entry-level position, but it helped Susan transform from an abused wife to an independent divorcee. As for Julie, things moved quickly on Friday. After meeting with my personal banker, transferring some money, and closing several joint credit card accounts, Julie was serviced on Friday evening when she returned home from work. I decided not to serve Julie at work, even though it would have been nice to embarrass her in this way. My lawyer advised me to remain calm until a settlement was reached. I took his advice, and in the long run, it turned out to be a smart decision, financially speaking. The locks have been changed. Julie was greeted at the door by my lawyer's representative and handed a packet of divorce papers. Before Julie could open the package, I called her into the dining room. "What is this, Sam?" she asked, holding the package in her hands. "These are divorce papers, Julie. Sit down for a second." Julie just stared at me as she sat down. "Julie, I know you set up this whole charade for me so you could sleep with Kyle without me knowing I was set up. I know you two knew each other before all this started. I know you met him last week while I was out of town. I'm not going to stay married to a liar and cheater." Julia resisted. "But you slept with Susan. Don't play Mr. High and Powerful with me." I never touched Susan. We only told Kyle that lie so she wouldn't get beaten up again. You didn't know that. At least I hope you didn't know that. Kyle beat Susan after the first weekend when she and I didn't follow through on your agreement. We had to fake it the second weekend for her. It doesn't matter now. Your little friend is in jail. He will most likely be there for some time. I sure as hell hope you don't do something stupid. For example, you pay a deposit for him. If you do this, I will make sure that the financial agreement is changed in the divorce. Julie spent the next half hour trying to convince me that we loved each other, that we could forget about it and start our family. She even tried that it was just sex crap. I kept my cool. It was hard not to yell at her for ruining our marriage and stymieing my love for her. It was already late, and I paid the lawyer sitting in the living room by the hour. I ended the call and told Julie to gather some personal items so she could find a place to live while the courts sorted out the details of our divorce. Julie had her own credit card and access to a checking account that still had a few $1,000s left in it, so she wouldn't be sleeping on the streets. It's a pity, but the law doesn't work that way. My phone rang 5 or 6 times that night after she left until I decided to turn off the phone and try to get some sleep. When I turned on my phone the next morning, there were just as many messages on my voicemail and even more texts from Julie. It wasn't fun or easy. I had a good divorce lawyer looking out for my financial interests, but nothing filled the giant hole in my heart. There were times when I almost stopped the divorce, thinking that I should give Julie another chance, but each time I remembered her deceitful actions and realized that I could never trust her again. During the divorce proceedings, Julie's lawyer tried to argue that I was just as guilty because I had sex with Susan. Susan's testimony stated otherwise. But her lawyer continued to make a big deal out of it until Susan and I suggested taking lie detector tests. This silenced him. My recording of Julie's confession that she had tricked me into the arrangement was never entered into the record, but the judge still listened to the transcript before ruling it inadmissible. How can you not hear something and forget it? I'm sure that had something to do with the final decision, which was fair, but far less than what Julie's lawyer wanted. During all this damn divorce-related, I did what too many betrayed husbands do. I drank a lot. My health and my relationships with friends and family suffered. Fortunately, during the workday, while I was busy with important matters, I could control myself, but after the end of the workday, everything returned to the bottle. See, the thing is, Julie is the kind of wife who will sit next to you on the couch and watch the Lions, even when the Lions are having a bad season. She saw that my beer was almost empty. She got up and got me another one. Long necks. And it's not easy beer crap, but real beer. How many wives will go to a dozen Tigers games every season? Wearing an alkaline jersey? These are just a few more reasons why I will miss her. But lies? I couldn't get past it, so I drank to forget. Today's intervention. This was about a month after the divorce was finalized. My father and my best friend showed up at my house one fine Saturday morning. They kicked out the girl I picked up the night before. Turns out we didn't even have sex because I was too drunk for it. Despite the anvil pounding in my skull, they made me shower, get dressed, and take me to breakfast. This was the beginning of my recovery. My friends took turns supporting me in my sobriety and path to recovery. In 3 months, I had a 10K race planned for charity. Running led to the next chapter of my life because that is how I met Deborah. We both ran along the school track. The soft running pad took some of the pressure off my limbs as I was now running up to 10 kilometers 4 days a week. And I couldn't help but notice a cute and athletic woman with a long blonde French braid. I've seen her a few times before, mostly on weekends. She was friendly enough to smile at my good morning as we walked by. I also noticed that she was paying close attention to a 5 or 6-year-old girl who was either doodling in a coloring book while sitting in the bleachers or running around the area. One Saturday morning, I decided to take a chance and introduce myself when a nice woman stopped and started stretching after her run. I stopped next to her, extended my hand, and told her my name. Of course, this could happen in 2 ways. She could ignore my attempt at friendship or shake my hand and tell me her name. She opened door number 2. "Hi, I'm Deborah. Nice to meet you, Sam. I've seen you here before. You always seem to be focused on your run, so I never bothered you." I looked into her big brown eyes, happy that she decided to accept my greeting. And I try not to pester the women who train here. I suppose it's hard enough to be an attractive woman without guys hitting on you everywhere you go, but I decided to take a giant leap of faith and ask if I could buy you a cup of coffee. I would love to have a cup, but I'm here with my daughter. Well, if you want, introduce me and take her with you. The cafe has hot chocolate and other treats for children. During this exchange, I noticed that the little girl was watching us with interest. Sorry, Deborah, before we continue, I noticed that you are not wearing a wedding ring. Please tell me that you are not married. I would never approach a married woman. No, I'm not married, and never have been. My daughter's father ran away a few months after I told him I was carrying his child. He was not ready to become a father or a husband. I'm raising Linda alone. By this time, the little girl was standing next to us, and I was introduced to Linda. Linda greeted me politely and seemed delighted by my offer of hot chocolate. We took our training bags. Linda grabbed her coloring supplies, and the 3 of us headed to a local coffee shop a block down the street. As we sat in that coffee shop, little Linda was enjoying her hot chocolate with a smile on her face. Deborah and I were making small talk over a cup of coffee. I felt something, but I couldn't describe it. Almost a year passed before I realized how I felt at that moment. At the time, I was too absorbed in having fun with these 2 charming ladies to attach much importance to it. My affair with Deborah began that Saturday morning. While talking over coffee, we planned to have a real date the following weekend, and everything worked out perfectly. Deborah and I had a lot in common: music, movies, politics. Over the next 2 months, We spent at least one weekend evening together. Linda was with one of her two grandparents or with a nanny. I tried to include Linda in our plans for at least one day every weekend. The little girl seemed to accept me and take a liking to me. Every once in a while, I would spend a weeknight having dinner at their house. Deborah and I took our time, but eventually became close after a few months of dating. It was during one of the weekends when Linda was with her father's parents. The father disappeared, but his parents were delighted with the appearance of their granddaughter. Deborah and I decided to spend the weekend in Chicago. I went all out. 2 adjoining rooms at the Palmer House, symphony tickets at the CSO, steaks at Ditka's. Unfortunately, Iron Mike was not there that evening. All in all, a great Saturday evening. It turns out that the second room was unnecessary. We made love. A few days after returning from our weekend in Chicago, I was sitting in my home office considering a buyout offer from a larger company based in Birmingham, Alabama. The doorbell rang, and who should have been standing on the threshold if not my ex-wife? "Sam, can we talk?" I knew where this would lead, but I let her in anyway. An old song started playing in my head. My mother used to sing it sometimes while cooking in the kitchen, and there was a line in it, "Don't you think you always don't know what you've got until you lose it?" I listened as Julie tried to convince me to let her stay the night. She just knew deep down that if we made love one more time, it would convince me that we were meant for each other. Julie's outfit exuded seduction, a thin blouse that barely hid her fantastic breasts, a short skirt that emphasized her long, slender legs. Her makeup was lightly applied as she knew I liked it. Julie was perfect. After Julie left, I grabbed the keys and drove to Deborah's house. It wasn't too late, but Linda had to go to bed and I needed to talk to Deborah without interruption. Deborah looked at me curiously as she opened the door. I immediately started talking. "Deborah, my ex-wife, came to my house this evening. She wanted to sleep with me to convince me that she and I should get back together." Before I could catch my breath and continue, Deborah interrupted me, giving me a look as if her best friend had just died. "Oh, Sam, you didn't?" "No, wait. I told Julie I was single and kicked her out of the house. I'm only ashamed of one thing. I told my ex-wife that I love you before I told you. I rushed here as soon as I closed the door behind her to tell you that I love you, Deborah Jones, and that you've made me the happiest guy I know." These must have been the right words. That night, Deborah and I slept together. The offer from the Alabama company was very good. I met with their president. He reminded me of a younger version of my grandfather. I am a decent businessman who wanted to expand my company to compete with some of the big players in our business field. Since I owned a controlling stake in our company, I could make the decision on my own. But I approached my parents, who owned 15%, and our 12 employees, who owned another 18%. After reviewing the offer and hearing the acquiring company's need to not only maintain the plant in Michigan, but also expand here, everyone agreed to the buyout. I agreed to stay for at least a year to manage the transition and train my deputy as plant manager. We negotiated for the next 2 months. The morning I had to sign the final papers, I got up early, poured 2 cups of hot coffee, bought 2 jelly rolls from the diner, and drove to the church cemetery. I placed 1 coffee and 1 muffin on my grandfather's tombstone and unfolded my lounge chair to sit for a while. "What do you think, Grandfather? Am I doing the right thing? You spent 25 years building this business, and now I'm selling it. I wish you were here to give me instructions like you have done all these years. I admit, I was looking for some sign from above. Anything that would help me get rid of the guilt I felt about missing out on such a precious gift. Of course, all the logical T's were crossed out, and the I's were dotted. The sale made sense. All the employees agreed with this decision, but my heart did not agree with it. I sat for another half hour, finishing my coffee and muffin, waiting for the sun to rise above the eastern sky, hoping that some plant or animal or whatever will do something mystical. Nothing, nor the wise owl sitting in a nearby tree, making a sound that I could interpret as a sign. Nothing. I folded up the lounge chair and headed to the car. I went to the lawyer's office and signed the papers. I felt like crap, despite the smiles of everyone else at the conference table. On the other hand, my personal life couldn't have turned out any better if I had starred in a Hallmark movie. I was in a loving relationship with a beautiful, inside and out, woman. Almost a year after the night I confessed my love on Julie's porch, Julie and I were engaged, and that's when things started to get tense between Linda and me. During the time Deborah and I were dating, and up until that point, Linda spent at least one weekend a month with her father's parents. I was usually at Deborah's house when Linda arrived on Sunday afternoons. During the time Deborah and I were dating, and up until that point, Linda spent at least one weekend a month with her father's parents. I was usually at Deborah's house when Linda arrived on Sunday afternoons, and we never noticed any negativity after Linda returned home, but Linda's attitude changed shortly after Deborah and I announced our engagement. Suddenly, Linda began to act differently towards me. Linda's paternal grandparents asked if Linda could spend more time with them, and Deborah graciously agreed. Now, Linda visits their home at least twice a month. The first clear sign that there was no mistake in this, that something was wrong, appeared 2 months before the wedding. I asked Linda if she would take her empty plate to the sink after dinner. Her answer was, "You are not my father, and you cannot tell me what to do." Linda ran out of the room. Deborah and I looked at each other. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "I don't know. Let me check on her." That was Deborah's answer before getting up from the table. I sat there for 10 minutes or more before I realized that Deborah wasn't coming back to finish her meal. I cleared the table, including Linda's plate. I put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher, the leftovers in the refrigerator, and still no sign of Deborah. I walked down the hallway and gently knocked on Linda's bedroom door. Deborah opened the door, walked out into the hall, and told me she would be staying a little while. That Linda is very upset. Should I just leave? Probably. I'll call you tomorrow. I'm going to spend the night trying to figure this all out. I left, went to Miller's Tavern for a drink, and then headed home. The relationship between Linda and I did not improve. In fact, they slowly got worse. I was at a loss, trying to find a way to reconnect with Linda. I even read a couple of books about adopted children and talked to a therapist. Sometimes what I tried seemed to get us back on track, but not for long. It was 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It was a month before our wedding when we also learned that Linda's father, Nathan Miles, had returned to town and was living with his parents. Here's a guy who ran away when his girlfriend was 4 months pregnant, saw his daughter a total of 3 times in the first 7 years of her life, never paid a penny of child support, and suddenly we're hearing hints about parental rights from Nathan's parents. Throughout this 3-month period, up until the week before the wedding, Deborah tried her best to play the role of referee. She tried many ways to improve the relationship between Linda and me. Unfortunately, Deborah saw everything through the eyes of a single mother who was solely responsible for the well-being and upbringing of her child. She was clearly biased towards Linda when it came to who should do what to make the relationship work. That's why I read these books and talked to a therapist. Things came to a head the weekend before our wedding. I was sitting in Murphy's drinking a bottle of beer when Nathan Miles walked through the door. I had only met this asshole once before, when he dropped Linda off after one of her visits to her grandparents. Nathan stood next to me and began, "Listen, you're not going to take on the role of daddy to my little girl. Her mother has no fucking right to let you be her daddy. I won't let this happen." I turned in my chair to look him straight in the eye, but before I could say anything, Ed, the bartender, came over and asked him to watch his mouth. There were other people at the bar. He also warned the 2 of us to be quiet and not be rude. Ed's words calmed me a little, and I softened my answer to Nathan. "Look, I won't try to take over your role as Linda's father, but that means you have to become a father. You can't be her father if you're only going to see her once every couple of years, or if you call her mother obscene names. It doesn't work that way." Nathan's response to my attempt at politeness was not at all what I expected. He shouted, "Fuck you. I will raise my daughter the way I want," and hit me. Here's the thing. I've never taken martial arts lessons. I've never served in the military or as a secret agent, and I've never carried a gun in my life. But I have a very strong head, and I was lucky that my father taught me to defend myself and respond if I got into a fight. For probably the third time in my life, I applied what my father taught me to Nathan. Before he realized what had happened, I gave him the change. The ambulance and the police arrived at the same time. I'm incredibly lucky. 2 other patrons heard my subdued verbal response to Nathan's initial outburst, and at least 5 patrons saw Nathan hit me first as a provocation. I spent over 4 hours in the hospital emergency room on Friday night. As I left the hospital early Saturday morning, I was trying to figure out how I was going to turn the left side of my head toward the camera during wedding photos. The left side of my head was shaved for the 6 stitches the doctor gave me. I didn't need to worry. I won the battle but lost the war. Saturday afternoon, I knocked on Deborah's front door. She opened the door and Linda was standing behind her. Linda started screaming at me, "I hate you, I hate you. You tried to kill my dad." Deborah walked out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. "Linda is very upset now. Nathan's parents picked her up early and took her to visit her father in the hospital. They said you tried to kill him. I know it's not true, but he's pretty badly hurt. Listen, Deborah, I didn't start the fight. Just look at my head. He hit me with a beer bottle without any warning. He just took the bottle and hit me on the head." "Sorry, Sam. Why would he do this? What triggered it?" "He said I tried to steal his daughter. I explained that there was nothing like that. He hit me just like that. All I did was defend myself. I believe you, Sam, but I have a little girl who is traumatized after visiting her father in the hospital. I think we need to postpone the wedding until I can calm Linda down. What could I say?" "No. You have to marry me next week, even if your daughter cries and screams during the ceremony." I nodded my head, told Deborah I'd call her later, and then turned around and went home. I actually called Deborah. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and every day for the next 2 weeks. She hung on the phone for a while, promised to see her soon, and then hung up to take care of my daughter, or something like that. After 2 weeks, I told her we needed to talk. Deborah arranged for her parents to look after Linda, and we met at a nice cafe down the street from her house. It didn't go very well. "Sam, it's not getting any better. Linda flatly refuses when I ask her to invite you to dinner. She continues to say that you tried to kill Nathan. Did you tell her that he hit me first?" "Yes, but it doesn't fit in my head. She refuses to listen to me. Nathan's parents won't let her forget that it was Nathan who ended up in the hospital. I think we'll have to put off any talk of marriage for a while." "Marriage? Damn it, Deborah. We're not even dating anymore. We were supposed to get married last weekend, and this is the first time I've seen you in 2 weeks. And even then, you say you need to pick Linda up in an hour. Okay, we'll postpone the engagement, but give me back the ring. When you and Linda decide that I can be in your life again, just call me, and I'll put it back on your finger. I know I was being a jerk, but damn, I didn't start this shit. And Deborah was letting Nathan, his parents, and Linda control our lives. Nathan came into Linda's life less than 2 months ago, and he's calling the shots? I needed Deborah to see this." Deborah burst into tears and took off the ring, reluctantly giving it to me. "Deborah, I love you. This ring is yours, but not before you can get Nathan and his parents out of Linda's life and out of our lives. We need to be a family. This is what we have said from the very beginning, at least 2 weeks ago." Eventually, Deborah and I grew apart. We met occasionally over the next couple of months, but I was never allowed to return to her house for fear that Linda would react violently to my presence. When an old friend of mine called me from the West Coast and asked me to join him at a startup in Portland, I accepted the offer and planned to leave my hometown. My year of work at the acquiring company has passed. It was a good time for a new life. As I was packing up my things, I found a photo of Deborah, Linda, and me. When I looked at the photo of the happy trio, I remembered that first day in the cafe, and it dawned on me. The feeling I had that day when the 3 of us sat together for the first time. What I felt was the influence of other cafe patrons. They saw how happy we were at that moment and smiled at what seemed like a strange family scene. I only saw Deborah once after I moved to Portland. I was back in town visiting friends 5 years later when I ran into her in a local park. Deborah was walking behind a stroller with a small child inside. Deborah still looked well, but sad. I didn't avoid her when I saw her coming down the path towards me. We said hello. I looked into the stroller and complimented her on her beautiful baby. This is not mine, Sam, but my sister's. I never had another relationship after our breakup. It's just Linda and me. What happened to Nathan? He left town about 4 months after you left. Linda still spends time with his parents, but Nathan probably saw her twice before he died 2 years ago. That's probably good. He would most likely do something else to ruin her life like he ruined ours. He was a sick son of a bitch. Did Linda ever admit her role in our breakup after she saw her daddy leave again? No, Sam. Linda was the center of my world before you came into my life, and then again after you left. I spoil her. This is my life. Tears welled up in Deborah's eyes, and at that moment, I needed to leave. I was tempted to say something stupid like live your life, but I didn't say anything. What a waste. So let's go back to when Deborah and I broke off our engagement and I moved to Portland. Now I am 32 years old. 1 failed marriage, 1 broken engagement, and my heart is broken again. The distance from my hometown and all the reminders of failed love affairs would do me good. There was one positive aspect to my miserable life. The business startup my friend invited me to join was a brewery. Kevin Daniels, whom I met in college and spent many an evening drinking with, decided to start a microbrewery. It turned out that he had a talent for making exceptional ale, but no real experience in running a business. So he called me and asked me to join him. I would run the business and he would brew the beer and run the kitchen. We made a good team. The talents complemented each other and our business grew and prospered. Within 3 years, we opened a second branch. We were making 6-figure profits and also putting more money into the business. My personal life sucked. I dated some women and slept with a few of them. Overall, life was good. Not great, but good. Then I met Gwen. Gwen was an unmarried woman, the only single woman at a dinner party hosted by Kevin and his wife Sally. This was another obvious attempt by Sally to help me find someone to share my life with. It was obvious to Gwen, too, and the two of us had a little fun. During dinner, we had a few minutes to talk, and I discovered that Gwen was a smart woman with a beautiful smile and a good figure to boot. Right after dessert, Gwen said she had to go home. I asked her if I could call her sometime and set up a date. She said yes, but I would need to give her a little warning because she would need to hire a nanny for her 2 children. Needless to say, I didn't call. About a week after the dinner party, Sally came into the pub and my booth. Sally looked furious. I thought you were going to call Gwen and ask her out. She said, she hasn't heard a peep from you, and I think she's very hurt. I really liked Sally, and I certainly didn't want my partner's wife to be mad at me, so I responded to her as politely as I could actually do. Sally, Gwen has children. You know my story with Deborah. Do you think I should get involved with another woman just to have her kids ruin everything again? No thanks. Sally stared at me for a moment. Wow, I didn't even think about that. I'm sorry. I just thought you two seemed to be getting along last Saturday. I forgot about Debris and about what happened. Apology accepted. If you talk to Gwen, please tell her that I think she is beautiful and smart. Please tell her that I am sorry if I deceived her. If necessary, tell her why I will not call her. Okay, Sam. I will take care of it. Sorry. Sally left my booth, and I went back to my beer. 2 days later, I looked up from my desk and saw Gwen. She was even more beautiful than I remembered from Saturday dinner. Hello, Sam. Can I come in? When will I learn? I stood up and invited her in, closed the door to my office and pulled out a chair for her to sit. She was wearing a mid-thigh skirt, and her legs were longer than I remembered. Her white blouse contrasted nicely with her dark complexion. Then I noticed her eyes, light brown with green flecks. I don't remember ever seeing eyes like these before. Her dark hair fell just below her shoulders. I had to focus on her words because I was half drunk looking at this beautiful woman. Sam, Sally told me why you didn't call. It is understandable why you would be wary of children after such an experience. But I am not that other woman, and I think if you met my 2 children, you would see that they are different too. What about their father? Their father lives across the river in Vancouver. He sees them twice a month and about a month in the summer. He had a new family, which just so happened to include my ex-best friend, with whom he accidentally fell in love and she became pregnant. Now they have 2 children of their own. It's pretty lousy. Isn't it terrible when you find your loving spouse getting it somewhere else? What's next? I thought Sally said you broke up before the wedding? Sally didn't tell you, but I was married before the Deborah fiasco. My wife decided she needed a little more and we got divorced. But let's get back to your situation. So the ex won't pull any tricks if we start dating? I won't get ahead of myself, but let's just say that if I get married again, his alimony will disappear, although he will continue to pay child support. He keeps asking me when I'm going to find a man, an asshole. Now, I probably scared you away with such talk. Sam, it was nice meeting you, and I would love for you to come over next week and have dinner with me and the kids. Just a nice, casual dinner. Can I cook something to bribe you? Anything but what we serve here in the pub. I end up eating here 5 or 6 days a week. Are you familiar with Italian cuisine? I have my mother's recipe for lasagna. I could make it with garlic bread. Lasagna? Is it true? What evening? Gwen smiled. I could get used to that smile. I showed up the following Tuesday with a bottle of Chianti and a small bouquet of flowers. I met Jake, 7, and Robin, 5. 2 very sweet, very polite children. There was still half an hour left before dinner was ready. Jake asked me if we could play catch before dinner. I didn't bring my mitten, Jake. You could take one of Daddy's. He left a couple here. I looked at Gwen. A couple? Matt played for the Portland Sea Dogs. That's where I met him. It's a long story that we can discuss when the kids aren't here. I thought I saw a slight blush appear on Gwen's face as she told this story. Jake grabbed 2 mittens and we headed to the backyard. The kid had great hands and could catch, which surprised me since he was only 7 years old. After 20 minutes of this, Gwen and Robin came out and watched for a few minutes before calling us in for dinner. The smile in Gwen's eyes as she watched us pulled me closer to the whirlpool. This was the 2nd month after Gwen and I started dating. I was invited to accompany Gwen and the kids to a preseason barbecue for Jake's Little League team. A get-together of sorts organized by the coach to get parents involved before the season. First training. This was most likely an attempt by the coach to convince parents to buy into his program, including convincing the parents of all these future Major League stars to shut up and let him coach the kids. Much to our surprise, Matt was there. Jake must have told him about the barbecue because Gwen said she didn't. I recognized him from a photograph that Robin keeps on her dresser. I noticed that Matt was alone, and my senses began to flutter in anticipation of a fight. Matt walked up to us, and both kids ran up to give Matt a big hug. Then he straightened up and extended his hand. You must be Sam. Jake and Robin told me about you. Thanks for helping Jake with his game. He's gotten a little better over the last couple of months. Jake said you're working with him on it. Matt looked past me to Gwen. Hello, Gwen. Hello, Matt. Where's Nancy? She didn't want to come this afternoon after what happened last time. She said it was about Jake, not the adults. I think deep down she's still confused about how things turned out. Let's leave everything as it is. Fine? I looked at Gwen and saw it in her eyes. She would never accept that her best friend stole her husband. But then Gwen did something that just surprised the hell out of me. She looked me straight in the eyes and gave me a smile that made me smile. Have you ever met someone you were prepared to absolutely hate, but ended up loving? This is what happened the day I met Matt. He had such an easy, charming manner that tapped into the ball of vitriol I had been saving up in case I met the man who broke Gwen's heart. While Gwen was talking with the other mothers, Matt returned, and we spent another 20 minutes or so getting to know each other better. He left and joined another group of fathers when he saw Gwen returning. But just before the barbecue ended, he approached me again. Okay, maybe that's when I'll get a warning, I thought to myself as he walked towards me. Sam, I've done a lot of stupid things in my life, but there's only one thing I'm truly ashamed of. Gwen never deserved to be abandoned like Nancy and I did to her. She's a wonderful lady and mother. My love for Gwen wasn't strong enough to resist temptation when Nancy and I started flirting and then fell in love. I won't make excuses for myself, but I really wish Gwen all the happiness in the world. I know her well enough to see something in how she reacts to you. Good luck to you two." With these words, he turned around and left. Over the next year and a half, Gwen and I grew in love with each other as we became engaged and then married. At school and sporting events, Matt proved to be a decent person and a good father to my two stepchildren. Little did I know that the threat to my marriage would come from a source other than Matt. During the first year of our marriage, Gwen and I bought a nice old house in a great part of town, located on a 20-acre lot. Both Jake and Robin were settling into their new schools and seemed excited when Gwen and I told them about our plans to have another child or two. Robin was actually excited at the prospect of becoming a big brother. Jake was at an age where he was more like, "How does this affect me?" It was a friendly area. Several of our new neighbors came to greet us with small gifts. Donald and Joan Green, who lived next door, were the friendliest of all. A week after moving in, they invited the four of us to dinner. Gwen and I were invited to a small party for 3 other couples that the Greens were throwing the following weekend. "Maybe too friendly," Gwen commented as we left the party the following Friday night. "How many times did Joan flirt with you this evening?" "What?" I smiled because I really couldn't remember how it happened. Typical ignorant man. Gwen continued to undress for bed, watching me for signs of deception, but she noticed my confusion and simply smiled back. "Come on, don't tell me you didn't notice. I saw her snuggle up to you at least 2 or 3 times. And when Donald asked me to dance, I thought he was trying to trip me up. Damn. I felt like we were back in high school. I looked back and actually remembered watching the 2 of them dance. At the time, I thought Donald was just a lousy dancer, but now I know better. What a goat. I'll have to keep an eye on him. It's fun, but it was a weird party. When I spoke with the Collins couple, I felt like I was being interviewed for a job. And when we said we were leaving, the Greens seemed disappointed, but the others breathed a sigh of relief. It was as if they couldn't wait for the door to close behind us. The girls invited me to join them at a spa they are going to visit on the coast next month. I'm not sure I want to go. Why not? When was the last time you had the opportunity to have a girls' weekend? Not once in all the time I've known you. And you always say how you wish you had several girlfriends. Think about it. By this time, Gwen had pushed me back onto the bed. Are you trying to get rid of me? You know that's not true, I answered, kissing her. Up until this point, I had avoided saying anything about our sex life. I always considered myself lucky that the 2 previous women in my life were very good lovers. I'll just state that with Gwen, I'm not missing anything. Next month, Gwen was due to join the ladies for a 2-day weekend at a luxury spa. I was invited to join my husband at Donald's house for poker. We've been playing poker for a couple of hours. Booze flowed freely. The language and themes became more and more obscene. Hal Collins even shared some intimate details about their sex life. More intimate than I was willing to share, although I could feel 3 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for me to relax. After another 10 minutes of banter, Collins said to David, "Why don't you get another deck of cards? They don't bring me luck." David laughed before standing up and grabbing a deck of playing cards from behind the counter. At first I thought that the cards would be marked and I would start losing, but then David shuffled the cards, Larry cut the deck, and David dealt each of us 5 cards. Before picking up my cards, I examined the backs as carefully as possible for any markings. When I turned over the cards to see what I was dealt, I got the biggest shock of my life. Each card featured a photograph of Joan Green in very revealing outfits. In some photos, she was alone, and in others, she was with other men. I looked up. All 3 men laid their cards face up on the table. I looked from the cards to 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me with stupid grins on their faces. David was the first to say something. "What do you think about this, Sam? I ordered them special." All three began to laugh at my silence. If you still haven't understood this, we are exchanging wives, and we'd like you and Gwen to join our group. I found my voice. It will not happen. Neither Gwen nor I are not engaged in treason. Sam, it's not cheating when you agree to switch, and I wouldn't be so sure that your little innocent Gwen is that innocent. What you don't know is that Joan and the other girls talked to Gwen, and Joan told me that Gwen seemed more than a little curious. Why do you think they planned this spa getaway? To give us a chance to talk to you and convince you that you can have your cake and eat it too. I started to get up. Bullshit. David tossed me 2 cards. Look at them, Sam. Do you think any woman could resist trying this at least once in her life? Add some illegal substance to her and she'll crave it, like the rest of the girls. It's worth a look. I was so angry that I thought I could pounce on the 3 of them and beat them to a pulp. Part of me kept my sanity and realized that I didn't believe their claims about Gwen's involvement in all of this. I needed to talk to Gwen before I did something that would land me in jail. I walked out the patio door and returned to my home. Standing in the kitchen, I had to think. I held the phone in my hand, ready to call Gwen, but I hesitated. For this conversation, I needed to look Gwen in the eyes. It was already 2 a.m. Gwen was due home in 10 hours. Then we would talk. Unfortunately, Gwen's parents dropped Jake and Robin off at the house half an hour before Gwen got home. I couldn't have this conversation when 2 kids could overhear us. The situation was made worse when I saw the look on Gwen's face as she walked through the door. Something was wrong. She hugged me wonderfully, kissed me on the lips, but there was sadness in her eyes. My heart wanted to burst. What's happening? Gwen, we need to talk. Yes, Sam. We need to talk, but not here, in front of the children. I'll take tomorrow off. You can? We'll talk in the morning when the kids go to school. Fine. For the rest of the day, Gwen and I danced around each other, concentrating as hard as we could on the kids to pass the time. The hardest part was going to bed. We went to bed 2 hours later than usual. I spent those hours in the garage. When I finally climbed into our bed, Gwen moved in and hugged me. I love you. That's all she said. I took sleeping pills. I think Gwen did the same. I passed out after a few minutes. I woke up with the sun shining through the window, a good sign for Portland. I came downstairs just as the kids were leaving to catch the school bus. They each kissed me on the cheek, told me they loved me, and walked out the door. A normal school morning that I hoped wouldn't change after my conversation with Gwen. I felt like the sword of Damocles was hanging over my head as I sat and waited for Gwen to join me. How can a woman who wakes up, makes breakfast for the kids, wears a bathrobe, and wears her hair in a ponytail look so damn gorgeous? Gwen immediately got down to business. Sam, what is this nonsense about wanting to switch partners with your neighbors and their sneaky friends? Why do you think I want to change? Isn't that what you were talking about with these bitches? Wait, are you blaming me for this? I never said that I wanted to change. They told me you and the boys planned this shit. They said that's why you convinced me to go to the spa with them. I told them that we both got divorced because our spouses cheated and we had an ironclad pact against cheating. They told me that it is not cheating when a husband and wife agree to switch partners. It's the same shitty phrase they used against you. Gwen and I looked at each other. It may have been early morning, but the light bulbs in our heads went off at the same time. Crap! They played with us! There were tears in Gwen's eyes. Now, I regret that we didn't talk about it last night. Yesterday, I was worried all day that we would have a protracted fight over their offer to join them. I continued telling Gwen about the card game, about the cards with sexy photos of Joan Green and the conversation that followed. Gwen told me that women tried to play with her in the same way. They made it sound like I was interested in the exchange and wanted her to go along with the plan. We walked in circles, and in the end I had to ask, what makes you think that I would be interested in these women? Didn't I say that you are my ideal? Sam, you should know by now that almost every woman, especially in her 30s, is at least a little insecure. And I saw all 3 of these women naked last weekend. They all look great, especially Joan. I don't know if she had a job, but this woman is well built. Maybe, But she also sleeps with everyone. I couldn't believe these photos. I don't find it the least bit sexy. I looked at Gwen. Something was still wrong. What's the matter, baby? I can tell that something is still simmering inside and waiting to come out. What's on your mind? Sam, I hope you don't hate me, but something else happened this weekend, and I'm ashamed of myself. Oh, I'll try to stay calm, Gwen. Go ahead, tell me. Gwen took a deep breath and began. Her eyes alternated between looking at me and at her hands as she spoke. All the girls wanted a massage and convinced me that I needed one too. I didn't see anything wrong with it. The spa seemed like a reputable place to me. That's when I saw all the women naked. It didn't seem like anything special to me. I've been seeing naked women since I played sports in high school and college. I wrapped myself in a towel and lay down on the massage table. The girls handed me a glass of wine. 2 massage therapists entered the room, and I was surprised that they were both men. One was tall, blonde, and the other was a stocky guy of Mediterranean appearance. But first, they each began working with Joan Green and Tina Collins. I sat and watched while drinking wine. I wanted to make sure the massage was legit, and it looked like it was. Nothing that either man did aroused my suspicions. At the same time, the wine made me feel warm inside, and by the time I finished the glass, I felt a tingling sensation. When it was my turn, the girls said that they had a special treat for me. I lay down on my back, covering myself with a sheet from my hips to my chest. One guy started working on my neck and shoulders, and a tall blonde guy started working on my feet and calves. Gwen paused to catch her breath. I didn't like where this was going, but I held my tongue. Gwen was having trouble with this, and I didn't want to interrupt her. She looked at me and continued. But then they started to cross the line. I grabbed the sheet, wrapped it around my body, and got the hell out of there. Eventually, I returned to my room. Thank God you persuaded me to stay in my own room. I cried for at least an hour, not answering any calls or knocks on the door. I couldn't believe how close these 2 men came to using me like this. I am not like that. I've never been like this. You were pumped with illegal substances. What? How? How? How do you know? Oh, I can't say for sure, but I'd bet $1,000 on it. The way you described the feeling after 1 glass of wine. You always handle your alcohol better. And the other day, David was bragging about how women go crazy after taking illegal substances. He showed me a photo of Joan having sex, said women needed a little illegal substance to get it done. These people make me feel worse every minute. They set you up like that. What do we do? It's probably too late to get a blood test, but let's call Dr. Malone and see what he says. Then we need to think. I realized that Gwen had never heard the full story of why Julie and I got divorced. She knew Julie was cheating, but I never talked about the attempted swap with the Taylors. Gwen listened as I told her everything. It was a long day. Now I had a huge problem. Gwen and I had just bought this house and were now living next door to a sick couple who were trying to manipulate us with lies and illegal substances to lure us into their twisted group. We couldn't afford to sell the house. We would have lost tens of thousands of dollars. Besides, with the exception of the Greens, we like the area, and the children have just moved in too. But how can we live next door to people we absolutely hate and disgust us with? Plus, part of me just wanted to make them suffer for their attempt to manipulate us, regardless of our marriage. They may even have been the reason for the previous owner's divorce. If we couldn't move, perhaps the Greens could be persuaded to move, but how? I racked my brain for several days until it dawned on me. Both the Greens and Collins had reputations and prominent positions in the city. They were switching spouses, but they kept it a secret. And even if someone thought the Greens were in a liberal city like Portland, was it such a big deal? Most people would think that this involves an exchange of partners between 2 couples. What is the problem? But I saw those playing cards. Photos that Donald thought would excite me and entice me to join their little gang. More than a few photos were taken by their pool. The Greens had a high fence for privacy and bushes that prevented any snooping. I even looked out of our upstairs bedroom window and saw nothing. Besides, it wouldn't do me any good to film their next games from anywhere on our territory. This would most likely be an invasion of privacy. I could embarrass the Greens, maybe even get them to move, but I would end up getting sued and probably lose. I had to find a way to film it from a location that couldn't be tied to me. Drone. I've been researching drones and finding that even the quietest ones can be heard when they're hovering overhead at night. How to position the drone for filming without hovering overhead? I looked at the top of Green's roof and an idea came to me. It would take practice and patience, but I think it could be done. With the general plan in mind, I sat down next to Gwen and told her my plans. I thought it would take some strong convincing, but Gwen not only supported me, she identified some gaps in my original plans and suggested improvements. One thing was clear. This only concerned the two of us. No one, not our children, not our parents, not our best friends, was supposed to know what we did, at least until the statute of limitations expires. I bought the quietest drone I could find and paid cash for it. Anyone who grew up playing video games will attest to how easy it is to fly a drone. With a few hours of practice, any gamer can land a decent drone with a good camera on a dime pad, or better yet, with a few leg extensions, on a roof canopy. A second proboscis-style camera will be attached to the front of the drone, giving it the appearance of a mosquito. I took a few days off and went out of town to train. By the second evening, I was able to get the drone to hover from the back of an abandoned barn, along the top to the front. Place him on the front of the top so that his proboscis hangs over the edge. I was ready. Now I needed a way to find out when the Greens were having fun. It turned out to be simple. Although I couldn't see inside their complex from the second-floor window, I could through a small hole I drilled into the wall from the attic. I inserted the second camera into the hole and connected the repeater to my laptop. Every Friday and Saturday night for the next 3 weeks, I checked the camera every few hours to see if there was a party going on. On the Saturday evening of the third weekend, I found myself in this mud. At 10 o'clock, there were 3 couples and 4 unaccompanied men in the pool area. Nothing was happening at the moment, but there were opportunities in the situation. I went to the garage, took the cover off the drone, and launched it. I walked out of the garage and looked up and down the street. Everything was quiet. I used the controls to lift her off the garage floor, out the door, and over the front lawn. Running back into the house, I turned on the monitor and opened the drone camera app. Now I controlled it with the camera so that it moved along the roof line until it was at the very edge of the top. She landed on top smooth as silk, exactly where I needed her to be. I turned on the proboscis camera and focused. The camera captured 2/3 of the pool area, clearly enough to see faces even in low light. I let the computer record what was happening and went to the kitchen to get a beer. This was my first chance to tell Gwen, who was watching a movie in the living room, what was going on. She took a glass of wine and joined me in the office. Just after midnight, we had enough footage for a decent adult film. I had all the necessary personnel. As the party next door moved inside, I fired up the drone again and pointed it back toward our garage. I spent Sunday morning editing the video. There would be no doubt about who the main characters were. The faces of David and Joan Green were featured prominently. The movie editing program was easy to learn. Within an hour, I learned how to zoom in on the parts I wanted to show and even learned how to freeze the action. Overall, 30 minutes of what I thought was a great adult video. I showed Gwen the final product. Gwen's evil grin told me everything I needed to know. It took several days to upload copies of the video to various free sites. Several Tumblr accounts happily uploaded snippets to their sites. Several other amateur sites took the full 30 minutes to load. Once enough copies had been aired, I began the final phase of telling the Greens' neighbors, business associates, and co-workers that the video was available to watch. I was especially careful to make sure that the advertising campaign could not be associated with me, but once the campaign was launched, it took on a life of its own and grew. A week later, a for sale sign appeared on the Greens' front lawn. I heard they moved to Los Angeles. They probably fit into the right company there. No one ever guessed how the video was filmed, since the camera angle left no doubt that the video was taken from the Greens' own home. Most people assumed that the Greens were filming their own games, and the recording was intercepted or the video was stolen. Whenever this topic came up, I came up with my own theory. The Greens recorded their games on tape, stored the videos on a computer, and the Greens' computer was hacked. Someone trying to steal personal information suddenly struck gold. One of the other two couples involved in that night's game even tried to sue the Greens for invasion of privacy. I heard that this lawsuit was quietly settled, but that's just a rumor. I must admit, for several months after Greens left, I wondered if I would have some bad karma for ruining their lives in Portland. I believed that my actions were justified. After all, if the Greens had simply asked us to trade, we would have given them a straight answer and refused. But I couldn't accept the manipulation. If karma has a problem with my nuclear response, well, go ahead. I didn't have to wait long for an answer to my questions. One afternoon, 4 months later, I came home from work to find my mom and dad in our living room. Gwen's parents were there too. They sat with Jake and Robin on the large sofa. "Mom, Dad, what brought you to the city?" I looked at Gwen, and then at her parents and children. Everyone except Gwen had the same look of bewilderment on their faces. Gwen broke the silence. "I called your mom and dad here because they need to hear this firsthand. And it wouldn't be fair to my parents or my children if everyone didn't hear it at the same time. There are no favorites in this family, isn't that what we said?" Gwen's words made me remember the vow we made to each other the day I proposed. What if she and I had children of our own? Would I play favorites? "Sam, in 8 months, we will have a new baby. You will become a father again." Gwen looked at Jake and Robin. Again. Group hugs, handshakes, a few kisses, and of course, a lot of tears. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch of our house and smoked a cigar. My father was sitting next to me. After a few puffs, he began to speak. "Your mother and I are thinking about selling our house in Michigan and moving here. Your mom wants to be close to her grandson, and we've both started to think of Jake and Robin as our grandsons too. Any thoughts on this?" "Dad, the only thing that has always made my move to Portland difficult is the distance it created between me and you both. I wouldn't want anything better. And I know Gwen feels the same. We couldn't be happier. Sam, your mom and I couldn't be more proud of how you've grown up. This is mainly due to you and, of course, your grandfathers. I'd have to be a big loser to mess up how many benefits I've been given. Yes, but many children get advantages and simply nullify them. Add to that bad luck with those 2 women at home, and you've got a recipe for failure. And I followed this path until you and Pete pulled me out of the house that day and sobered up. Oh, I have no doubt that you would have gotten there on your own. It just might have taken a little longer." I looked over my shoulder and made sure we were alone. "Dad, I never asked, and you don't need to tell me. But was Mom your first love?" Dad looked over his shoulder, and I knew I had learned some big, dark secret. "Sam, I saw your mom in chemistry class when I was in high school. It took me several weeks to work up the courage. She was just so damn beautiful, but I asked her out and we've been together ever since. This is one case in 1,000, but I was so lucky. So why did you have to look over your shoulder before telling me that?" "Because I have a secret that I've been hiding from your mother all these years. Your mother thinks she was stalking me all those years ago. I never told her that I was sitting 2 rows away from her with puppy dog eyes. She doesn't know that it took me all these weeks to work up the courage to ask her out. She decided I was too popular to notice the new girl at school. You may think this is stupid, but I always thought that I would keep this secret until the day I die. And on that day, I will tell her this one secret. Looks like something out of those cheesy romance novels she reads. Corny, right?" After listening to my father's confession, I took a deep drag on my cigar. I didn't want him to see the moisture in my eyes and realize that I was suffocating. Then Dad continued, "You're only 38. With a little luck and hard work, you and Gwen can celebrate your 50th anniversary together. You will have children and grandchildren to celebrate with you. I have a feeling for this girl that I never had for the other 2. Gwen is the one and only. I had to take another long drag. I doubt Dad was fooled. This conversation on our veranda with my father took place 5 years ago. 8 months later, Gwen gave birth to a baby girl, whom we named after our mothers. Mom and Dad sold their house in Michigan and bought 2 acres on the river northwest of town in St. Helens. Kevin and I are resisting offers from a major national beer brand to buy our 4 pubs and brewery. We're resisting because financially we're doing great, and most importantly, we're still having fun. Neither Kevin nor Sally nor Gwen are greedy, so it just works. When Gwen and I had our second child, a boy we named after my grandfather, we decided 4 would be enough. The way Gwen has stayed in shape after 4 children is a miracle. I look at this woman every chance I get. She laughs loudly because sometimes I sit on the toilet and just watch her shower. It's like my personal adult show that I don't want to share. It took a few years, but we even invited Matt, Nancy, and their 2 kids to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. It was a difficult decision, but we decided that it would be easier for Jake and Robin as they grew up if all the adults in their lives could be together in one room, especially if it is to celebrate and give thanks for all the blessings we have had in life. Gwen's parents and my parents were there too. That night before dinner, we had to sit down with Gwen's mom and explain the rules. This woman may have a sharp tongue and still gets angry when Nancy's name is mentioned. But the first Thanksgiving went off without a hitch, so we did it again last year. I think it made the right impression on my stepchildren. I guess that was my way of saying, maybe a little long-winded, but there was nothing else we were doing in hell, sitting on that river and pretending we were going to catch some fish today. That life just throws you a curveball sometimes, especially when it comes to finding the one. It took my father 1 try, and it took me 3. But I'm enough of a romantic to believe that everyone has a soulmate. Just remember not to settle. Sam and Julie's cancer was destroyed by cheating. Julie got Sam into a partner swap agreement with another couple, Kyle and Susan, even though Sam was against it. It was later revealed that Julie had engaged in a sexual relationship with Kyle long before their exchange. He was revealed to be a man who beat his wife, Susan. As a result, Sam filed for divorce. Sam, after his divorce, meets Deborah, a single mother, and her daughter, Linda. They begin a relationship and plan to get married soon. However, a week before the wedding, Linda's father, Nathan, appears and confronts Sam. After a bar fight in which Sam defends himself, Linda accuses him of trying to kill her father. Deborah, under pressure from Linda and Nathan's parents, is forced to postpone the wedding. Gradually, Sam and Deborah's relationship falls apart due to the influence of Nathan and his parents. Sam moves to another city. Years later, he accidentally meets Deborah, who has not found a new relationship since their breakup. Nathan abandoned Linda again, and Deborah devoted herself entirely to her daughter, spoiling her. After moving to Portland, Sam meets a woman who has 2 children and again takes risks, but still starts dating her. Everything works out great. They get married and buy a house. After a party with the neighbors, they realize that they tried to force them to agree to an exchange of spouses with deception and manipulation, but they did not fall for their hook, but on the contrary, by filming explicit footage of the neighbors' sexual games from a drone and posting them on the internet, they managed to survive these perverts from next door. The relationship between Sam and his 3rd wife has become even stronger. They have 2 more children together. The business is working great. Life is wonderful. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. 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 Listening to the next one.